Hi everyone, welcome back to another video with Arash from the YouTube channel English with Arash. In this video, I'm gonna go ahead and do the last section of this Ielts listening test. If you remember, if you go to my playlist, the name of the playlist is Ielts listening, and I'm gonna do the last section and I will tell you what my score will be. Alright, good. So let's get started. We're gonna today do this last part. So if you remember, let me open the answer sheet as well. So if you remember, if you haven't checked out my previous videos, make sure you go do and then come to this video, because this is video number 4, unit number 4 of my IELTS listening free course. This course has great quality, as you can see in here, and this is all for free. You can use it, but you should try to watch them in order so you understand like what are the steps that we're taking. Anyway, this is an IELTS listening answer sheet. You see my candidate name here. It's Arash Rahmati, that's my candidate name, and then you write candidate number and date, things of that nature. There are 40 questions in the listening part. Unit 1, if you go to my IELTS listening playlist, this is unit 1, this is unit 2. I've done these tests with you in real time, and I have analyzed these tests right after I finished, so I think you can really use these tips that I give you every time. My own IELTS listening band score was 8.5, so you can rely on my advice because these are the things that have worked for me, at least. So even if it doesn't work for you, all of you, it does work for 10% or 5% of you. So yeah, try to use these tips. And this was unit 3. Today I'm gonna do unit 4, which is from 31 to 40. Take a look at my paper. 31, 32, 33, all the way to 40. I want you to, right now, pause the video, go get a piece of paper, get a pen or a pencil. Actually, in the IELTS exam, you are required to write in pencil. Here, I just took a pen because I don't have a pencil, or I can't find it now. Anyway, make sure that in the real exam you are writing in pencil. Anyway, just write these numbers, pause the video, go get what I told you, because we want to take this test right now and we want to do this together. Okay, let me just check if my voice is okay. While we are doing the test, I turn off my webcam, I turn off my audio, so you don't see me, you don't hear me, you just see the screen. And that's why I just move this screen a little bit when we go further down in questions. Section 4 is again a gap filling exercise. Read the question carefully. Is it one word only? Is it one word and a number? Is it no more than 2 words? Is it 3 words? What is it? I will not spoil it now, but I'm just telling you, be careful about what the question is. Today I don't want to waste a lot of time. Not waste, I want to explain too much because I already have explained enough in the first videos. I'm gonna go ahead and do this real quick and analyze it. I don't want to make you tired. Just make sure you have what I told you. And one more thing, I promise this is Cambridge 11 test 1 section 4. I promise I have not taken a look at these tests before. It's my very first time facing these tests, and I am telling you my real score in real time. Even if I get 6, you will see that. If I get 9, you will see that, because I show you my answers. I know this is not a live video, but it is actually kind of live because I'm just recording whatever I'm doing. I'm not recording anything for a second or a third time. So please trust me with that. Don't worry about the noise of the ambulance. I'm gonna mute my microphone right when we get into the test. All right, let's get started. And one more thing, I had 3 mistakes here in section 1, 2, 3. One mistake was number 9. If you go back to videos, you will see one mistake was number 20 and one mistake was 27. That means my score right now is 8.5. Okay, if I make no mistakes in this part, I will remain at 8.5. But if I make one more mistake in this part, I will get a band score of 8. I really hope I can get an 8.5, but I don't want to hide anything. So even if I get 8, I'll tell you. Even if I get 7.5, I'll tell you. So let's see what will happen. And this was section 1. It was a gap filling exercise. And then we had section 2, which was a little bit of gap filling, and there was a map. Section 3, which was the longest video because it was the hardest, multiple choice. That's the part a lot of students struggle. So make sure to go back to my video if you haven't seen this, because I've given you practical advice. Yeah. And section 4, which is what I want to do today, ocean biodiversity. And this is not a very hard test because it says one word only, so you should just write a word, no number. Even if you want to write a number, just write it in letters. Write 2. Don't write 2 because it is a mistake. The question is one word only, so 2 is not accepted. Even if you want to write a number, you have to actually write it in letters. And you should write no more than one word, so just one word. Be careful, that's important. All right, let me erase these parts. Now I'm going to get started. I'm going to play this video. You see there are question 31 to 40. I'm going to zoom a little bit. It seems to be okay. Oh, I'm a little excited and also a little stressed. I hope I can do this. But even if I get an 8 or 7.5, I'm still proud of myself. So don't try to stress me. I'm not going to be stressed. It's fine. I want to make mistakes. How about that? Let's start. I'm going to mute my microphone and video. Make sure you do the same. Be in a room that is not noisy so you can take the exam with me.
Section 4. You will hear part of a student presentation about the variety of different species that live in the world's oceans. First, you have some time to look at questions 31 to 40. Now listen carefully and answer questions 31 to 40.
I've been looking at ocean biodiversity. That's the diversity of species that live in the world's oceans. About 20 years ago, biologists developed the idea of what they called biodiversity hotspots. These are the areas which have the greatest mixture of species. So, one example is Madagascar. These hotspots are significant because they allow us to locate key areas for focusing efforts at conservation. Biologists can identify hotspots on land fairly easily, but until recently, very little was known about species distribution and diversity in the oceans, and no one even knew if hotspots existed there. Then a Canadian biologist called Boris Worm did some research in 2005 on data on ocean species that he got from the fishing industry. Worm located 5 hotspots for large ocean predators, like sharks, and looked at what they had in common. The main thing he'd expected to find was that they had very high concentrations of food, but to his surprise, that was only true for 4 of the hotspots. The remaining hotspot was quite badly off in that regard. But what he did find was that in all cases, the water at the surface of the ocean had relatively high temperatures, even when it was cool at greater depths. So, this seemed to be a factor in supporting a diverse range of these large predators. However, this wasn't enough on its own, because he also found that the water needed to have enough oxygen in it. So these 2 factors seemed necessary to support the high metabolic rate of these large fish. A couple of years later, in 2007, a researcher called Lisa Balance, who was working in California, also started looking for ocean hotspots, but not for fish. What she was interested in was marine mammals, things like seals. And she found 3 places in the oceans which were hotspots, and what these had in common was that these hotspots were all located at boundaries between ocean currents. And this seems to be the sort of place that has lots of the plankton that some of these species feed on. So now people who want to protect the species that are endangered need to get as much information as possible. For example, there's an international project called the Census of Marine Life. They've been surveying oceans all over the world, including the Arctic. One thing they found there, which stunned other researchers, was that there were large numbers of species which live below the ice, sometimes under a layer up to 20 meters thick. Some of these species had never been seen before. They've even found species of octopus living in these conditions. And other scientists working on the same project but researching very different habitats on the ocean floor have found large numbers of species congregating around volcanoes, attracted to them by the warmth and nutrients there. However, biologists still don't know how serious the threat to their survival is for each individual species. So a body called the Global Marine Species Assessment is now creating a list of endangered species on land, so they consider things like the size of the population, how many members of one species there are in a particular place, and then they look at their distribution in geographical terms. Although this is quite difficult when you're looking at fish because they're so mobile. And then thirdly, they calculate the rate at which the decline of the species is happening. So far, only 1,500 species have been assessed, but they want to increase this figure to 20,000. For each one they assess, they use the data they collect on that species to produce a map showing its distribution. Ultimately, they will be able to use these to figure out not only where most species are located, but also where they are most threatened. So, finally, what can be done to retain the diversity of species in the world's oceans? Firstly, we need to set up more reserves in our oceans, places where marine species are protected. We have some, but not enough. In addition, to preserve species such as leatherback turtles, which live out in the high seas but have their nesting sites on the American coast, we need to create corridors for migration so they can get from one area to another safely. As well as this, action needs to be taken to lower the levels of fishing quotas to prevent overfishing of endangered species. And finally, there's the problem of bycatch. This refers to the catching of unwanted fish by fishing boats. They're returned to the sea, but they're often dead or dying. If these commercial fishing boats used equipment which was more selective so that only the fish wanted for consumption were caught, this problem could be overcome. OK, so does anyone have any questions about...
That is the end of section 4. You now have half a minute to check your answers. That is the end of the listening test. You now have 10 minutes to transfer your answers to the answer sheet. Please stop writing and wait for your question booklet to be collected.
Okay. Oh, I'm quite positive I did really well on it, but there's one word I really doubt. Oh my god, these are my answers. Take a look at them. Number 1, I wrote conservation. Number 2, food. Number 3, surface, oxygen. But here, I don't know. I heard mammals, but I don't really know the spelling. I wrote 2 spelling, mammals with 1 M and another one with 2 M. I don't know, really, I don't know. I just picked the one with 2 M. I hope that's the answer, I'm not sure. And then I wrote the rest, you can see. Ice, decline, map, migration, consumption. Let's check. Oh my god. I think the worst can happen. What's the worst? I can get an 8 if my mammals is wrong. I don't know. Let's go to the answer. This is section 3. Now I'm gonna go to section 4. I'm a little excited and a little stressed, but let's do this. Oh, I made it. I'm so happy now. I could get this 8.5 finally. Okay, conservation, that's true. Food or foods, that's true. I wrote food. Surface, I wrote it. Oxygen or O2, that's weird. I wrote oxygen. Mammals with double M. Oh, I was lucky. I was doubting, like, this is not just M-A-M-A-L. It's probably 2M. I was really lucky. Ice, yes. Decline or declining or decrease, I wrote decline. Map, yes, I wrote it. Migration, I wrote it. Consumption. 8.5. That's the result I got. So you see, in my real exam, I also got an 8.5, so it makes sense. But now, stay with me. We're going to go ahead and analyze this. Alright, let's analyze this. I got my 8.5 because for part 4, all of my answers are correct. Let me write my answers here. So I misspelled it. It doesn't have an I, of course. And consumption. Consumption means consuming, eating, using. Consumption. And all of them are correct. So that's why I got my 8.5 and I'm super happy about it. I'm gonna color them, like highlight them with a different color to show that this is part 4. So now you have a sense of what an IELTS listening test is like. What are all the parts after these 4 units? You also have listened to my analysis, which does help you get better score. And that's my 8.5. Yeah. But if I made a mistake, if I had made a mistake with mammals and I had written only 1 M, I would get an 8. Because right now, what does this 8.5 mean? It means I got 37 questions right out of 40. That's the meaning of this 8.5. This 8.5 is equal to this for me here. Now you can calculate your score. Don't be afraid to share with us. Share it in the comments. Any score above 5 is a good score, so don't worry about it. If it's less, it means you need to go to my basic courses. This course is not yet for you. You should try my easier courses. Go to my playlist and you will see A1, A2, B1. They are for you. Anyway, now let's analyze the test together. Yes, so it says 1 word only. Be careful not to write 2 words. Only 1 word for each blank. Let's listen now.
Section 4. You will hear part of a student presentation about the variety of different species that live in the world's oceans. First, you have some time to look at questions 31 to 40.
Let me also get my mouse cursor so you can see what I do where I go. It would be easier for you to follow. Everything looks decent. It's better now. So at first, again, gave us some time. You should use this time to look at these questions. Try to guess. Let me pause it. Try to guess what you should put here. So one thing that is very important and I want you to do is to look at these titles. These titles are very important because that's how you can track the listening. Tracking is important. You need to know which section the listening is talking about right now. So you should read these titles first. Biodiversity hotspots, that's one subject. Then we talk about Boris Worm 2005, the name of the scientist. Then we're gonna talk about like who, Lisa Balance 2007. Read these headlines, or what do you say, the main parts, sections, like sections and subsections. So read the sections first and then read the subsections if you don't have time. Sections are important because that's how you can track the audio file. Next one is census of marine life. Next one is global marine species assessment. The last one is recommendations to retain ocean recommendations to retain ocean biodiversity. That's the last title we have. Sorry. So that's my recommendation. Read these sections, titles, headlines first. And then go back to the details. Areas containing many different species. Important for what? Important for locating. Locating means finding the location of something. Important for locating targets for something. we need a noun here. For happiness, for sadness, you can't put an adjective here. You can use a verb ing too, for example, for swimming, for eating, for writing. These are you need to have some idea what kind of word you can put there. So here you need a noun. Most of these IELTS gap fillings, you need a noun or adjective. Sometimes you need a verb too. And then identified for large sharks. Just have an idea of sharks so you can track it. Found that ocean hotspots were not rich in something. Again, you need a noun here. Rich in protein, rich in cholesterol, rich in vitamin A, rich in vitamin B. For example, if I say something is rich in vitamin A, it means it has a lot of it. Or if I say, for example, this vegetable is rich in vitamin C, it means it has a lot of vitamin C. Like if you take it, if you use it, you will have a lot of that. So that's the meaning of rich in something. Higher temperature. You should go back and find the subject. Always you should find the subject. Ocean hotspots had higher temperature at the where? At the bottom, at the surface, in the middle. And also, again, you should read the subject because you get lost. The subject says ocean hotspots had sufficient blank in the water. Sufficient means enough. Sufficient, very formal style of saying sufficient. So Boris Worm 2005 found that ocean hotspots had sufficient blank in the water, sufficient food, sufficient oxygen, sufficient nitrogen, something like that. I don't know. You need a noun here, sufficient something. Then Lisa Balance 2007 looked for hotspot for marine blank. Marine life, marine animals, marine what? Marine means relating to the oceans, I guess, or water. I don't know. You don't need to know it exactly, but let me connect to my internet. I want to check this word, marine. I know submarine means under the water, under the surface of water. So marine has something to do with water or ocean. I don't know why it's taking too long to connect. Found these were all located where ocean currents meet. This line is not really important. Census of marine life. Found new ocean species. Species means kinds of animal living under the surface, under the ice, under the rock, under the what? Under the air. So you should guess something. Near volcanoes on the ocean. This is not important, but this is important because you should track it. Global marine species assessment. They want to list endangered ocean species considering three things: population size, distribution, rate of something. Again, you need a noun. Of is a connector of two nouns. Door of the car. Door of the car. So the car is a noun, door is a noun. So to the left and the right of we always have a noun. You can add adjectives too, but here you can't do it because only one word. What do I mean by adding adjective? For example, you can say, let me tell you, because all these thoughts come to my mind. You can say beautiful door of the red car. Yes. Again, you see here. Beautiful door of the red car. Again, of is connecting two nouns. Of always connects two nouns. But here you see we also have added adjectives, the red car or beautiful door. But here it's not possible because it says you should use only one word to fill in the blanks. So here it has to be a noun. Whatever it is, it has to be one noun and one word. You should find that noun. Noun, I mean book, laptop. Good, bad are adjectives. They are not nouns. Anyway, and finally it says, what is the aim of the project? They want to check or assess, control, check, assess 20,000 species, kinds of animal, and make a distribution, what? Distribution chart, distribution plan, something. Again, it's a noun for each. For each one means for each species. Recommendation to retain ocean biodiversity. Biodiversity, I guess, is like let me see if my internet is back so I can use this Longman dictionary. This is a really good dictionary. Oops. What happened? Let me open Firefox. Biodiversity, it has something to do with diversity, like different animals. It should increase the number of ocean reserves. I don't know, I don't care about the meaning of that a lot. Establish something corridors. What corridors? Here you can use an adjective or a noun. Good corridors, bad corridors, big corridors, small corridors. These are adjectives. You can also use a noun to define another noun. For example, coffee cup. Coffee is a noun. Cup is also a noun. Okay. For a second I was really shocked. I think my computer froze. And I don't know, I connected the internet, something happened. Internet is crazy in my country. But hopefully the file was recorded so I don't have to record it again. I wouldn't really do that. Even if it had been removed, I would probably do it some other day. So I told you this, reduce fishing quotas. I don't know what it is, I don't care. Catch fish only for the purpose of something. Again, we have of, so we have two nouns, one before it and one after it. It could be an adjective too, but you need two words. For example, purpose of good consumption. But you can't do that. You only have one word. I told you most of the things I needed to tell you. I'll just play it one more time and I will tell you exactly where each part is mentioned.
Section 4. You will hear part of a student presentation about the variety of different species that live in the world's oceans. 1 to 40.
Biologist species that
And answer questions 31 to 40.
Just one thing I need to tell you, the difference usually between part 4 and part 1, because both of them are usually gap filling exercises, but the difference is part 4 is a monologue, so one person is speaking, but part 1 is commonly a dialogue. So if you remember, in part 1 two people were talking. One person was talking about farming, something like that, and another person was the customer asking for the price, things of that nature. But here in part 4 it's just a monologue, it's like a presentation, it's more academic. So I just wanted to let you know that. Let's just start.
I've been looking at ocean biodiversity. That's the diversity of species that live in the world's oceans. About 20 years ago, biologists developed the idea of what they called biodiversity hotspots.
Biodiversity hotspots. So now we are getting close. We are here. You can see biodiversity hotspots. He's talking about this area.
These are the areas which have the greatest mixture of species.
they have the greatest mixture of species, so they have different species. It was actually a paraphrase for different species. It's like mixture.
These are the areas which have the greatest mixture of species. So one example is Madagascar. These hotspots are significant because they allow us to locate key areas.
Because they allow us to locate, it means find the location of. Because they allow us to find the location of key areas. Key here means important. It doesn't mean like key, you open the door. No. Key here means important.
Hotspots are significant because they allow us to locate key areas for focusing efforts at conservation.
Key areas for focusing efforts at conservation. So, targets is exactly that, key areas. Target means an area that you want to target, you want to attack, you want to work on. So key area here is a paraphrase for targets. But what are these for? That's the question. Locating targets or key areas for what? Areas for what? Listen.
Allow us to locate key areas for focusing efforts at conservation.
For focusing efforts at conservation. Conservation means keeping, saving, protecting animals. So that's a more general and meaningful word to put here. Conservation. Areas that are important. We want to locate targets. We want to locate important areas for conservation. It means they help us find those areas that are important for us to protect, right? So you can say, hey, this area is important. The people know the species are dying here. We need to protect them. We need to conserve them. So we need to do conservation. So the word here, I was listening for a noun. I heard different noun: Madagascar, areas, focusing, and conservation. Conservation was the best noun actually that I heard among all these nouns.
Is Madagascar. These hotspots are significant because they allow us to locate key areas for focusing efforts at conservation. Biologists can identify hotspots on land fairly easily, but until recently, very little was known about species distribution and diversity in the oceans, and no one even knew if hotspots existed there. Then a Canadian biologist called Boris Worm did some research in 2005 on data on ocean.
So that part wasn't important, but this Boris, it's important. It means we are coming to this part.
Species that he got from the fishing industry. Worm located 5 hotspots for large ocean predators like sharks and looked at what they had in common. The main thing he'd expected to find was that they had very high concentrations of food, but to his surprise, that was only true for 4 of the hotspots.
Anyway, now we are looking for something like this. Ocean hotspots were not always rich in something. Rich in what?
The remaining hotspot was quite badly off in that regard. But what he did find was that in all cases, the water at the surface of the ocean had...
This one was very hard actually, because he mentioned food before this area and didn't talk about rich in something, just said had. Listen.
He'd expected to find was that they had very high concentrations of food.
They had very high concentrations of food. So you need a noun here. You can write concentrations. You can also write food. Food is better because you are saying that all of them are not rich in food. All of these habitats, all of these areas are not very rich in food. Many of them are, but not all of them. Listen.
Like sharks, and looked at what they had in common. The main thing he'd expected to find was that they had very high concentrations of food.
He expected to find. he expected that they would have high concentrations of food.
But to his surprise, that was only true for 4 of the hotspots.
It was only true for 4 of them, so all of them, no. Not always rich in food, only 4 of them.
The remaining hotspot was quite badly off in that regard. But what he did find was that in all cases, the water at the surface of the ocean had
The water at the surface
relatively high temperatures.
had relatively high temperature. Had high temperature. So here the answer is surface. Be careful, surface is mentioned before high temperature. Listen again, you want to get used to these Ielts techniques.
Badly off in that regard. But what he did find was that in all cases, the water at the surface of the ocean had relatively high temperatures.
Surface. What does surface means? If this is the ocean, I'm gonna draw some ocean here. If this is the ocean and then we have fish and stuff, there is a boat here. This part is called the surface of the ocean. On the top, the surface. Temperature was higher at the surface.
The water at the surface of the ocean had relatively high temperatures, even when it was cool at greater depths. So, this seemed to be a factor in supporting a diverse range of these large predators. However, this wasn't enough on its own, because he also found that the water needed to have enough oxygen in it.
Enough. Enough means sufficient. Needed to have enough oxygen or sufficient oxygen. Again, it's not safe to write it yet because the question is not what it needed to have. The question is what it had. The question is ocean. He found that ocean hotspots had. This is a certain sentence, but he didn't say it yet.
Because he also found that
He also found. It's okay. He also found.
However, this wasn't enough on its own, because he also found that the water needed to have enough oxygen in it. So these 2 factors seemed necessary to support the high metabolic rate of these large fish. A couple of years later, in 2007, a researcher called Lisa Balance, who was working in California, also started looking for ocean hotspots, but not for fish. What she was interested in was marine mammals, things like seals.
Marine mammals, the one I doubted. So yes, marine mammals. I wanted to check the word marine. Let me check marine. Marine means related to sea or sea trans, related to water like sea, oceans. Marine mammals, mammals that lived in the sea actually.
And she found 3 places in the oceans which were hotspots, and what these had in common.
I mean, this part is not really important. You can just wait for the next headline, which is Census of Marine Life. You don't have to really listen. You can read the other blanks, actually.
He was interested in was marine mammals, things like seals. And she found 3 places in the oceans which were hotspots, and what these had in common was that these hotspots were all located at boundaries between ocean currents. And this seems to be the sort of place that has lots of the plankton that some of these species feed on. So now people who want to protect the species that are endangered need to get as much information as possible. For example, there's an international project called the Census of Marine Life. They've been surveying oceans all over the world, including the Arctic. One thing they found there, which stunned other researchers, was that there were large numbers of species which live below the ice. Sometimes
the ice. Found a number of species which lived below the ice. Below means under. So below is a paraphrase for under. I think it wasn't really hard for most people. So below means under and below the ice.
There were large numbers of species which live below the ice, sometimes under a layer up to 20 meters thick.
This part is not important.
Some of these species had never been seen before. They've even found species of octopus living in these conditions. And other scientists working on the same project but researching very different habitats on the ocean floor have found large numbers of species congregating around volcanoes, attracted to them by the warmth and nutrients there. However, biologists still don't know how serious the threat to their survival is for each individual species. So a body called the Global Marine Species Assessment is now creating a list of endangered species on land, so they consider things like the size of the population, how many members of one species there are in a particular place, and
so they're checking different factors. One of them is population size, the size of the population.
And they look at their distribution in geographical terms.
Distribution in geographical terms, that's number 2, already mentioned. Number 3 is rate of what? Rate of what?
Although this is quite difficult when you're looking at fish because they're so mobile. And then thirdly, they calculate the rate at which the decline of the species is happening.
They calculated the rate at which the decline of the species is happening. The decline, so rate of decline, rate of reduction, rate of, you can see the answers here. What were they? Decline, declining, decrease. I usually don't write a word that I don't hear, so I never write decrease or declining. I just write what I hear. And here I wrote what I heard. I heard decline. Exactly, I heard the word decline.
Quite difficult when you're looking at fish because they're so mobile. And then thirdly, they calculate the rate at which the decline of the species is happening. So,
and this decline is a noun. The decline of the species is happening. This decline is not a verb, but it can also be a verb. But here it's a noun. The rate of decline, the rate of reduction, that's the meaning of that.
So far, only 1,500 species have been assessed, but they want to increase this figure to 20,000. For each one they assess,
so now they have assessed or checked 1,500 species, but they want to expand it. They want to increase it to 20,000.
They use the data they collect on that species to produce a map showing its distribution.
They want to produce a map showing its distribution. So what is it? It's a distribution map, right? A map that shows the distribution of something can be called a distribution map, and that's the best noun that you can find in these last recent words. Listen again.
20,000. For each one they assess, they use the data they collect on that species.
They use the data they collect. Data doesn't fit here. Distribution data. Species, distribution of species, that's number 2.
To produce a map.
To produce a map. Map is a good noun here.
Showing its distribution.
Showing its distribution. What does it mean? A map showing its distribution. It's an adjective clause. A map showing something. It means a map that shows. So it's an adjective clause. They just made it smaller. They used the short form.
To 20,000. For each one they assess, they use the data they collect on that species to produce a map showing its distribution. Ultimately, they will be able to use these to figure out not only where most species are located, but also where they are most threatened. So, finally, what can be done to retain the diversity of species in the world's oceans?
What can be done to retain? So now we are here. You can increase the number of something.
Firstly, we need to set up more reserves in our oceans, places where marine species are protected. We have some, but not enough. In addition, to preserve species such as leatherback turtles, which live out in the high seas but have their nesting sites on the American coast, we need to create corridors for migration. So
here also the word nesting was in my mind, like nesting crider didn't make sense. but the better word is migration, because it's corridors for migration. So we can say migration corridors. So you see how Ielts is really playing with words. For example, it says corridors for migration, so you should change it to migration corridor. It's a game. Ielts says a map that shows distribution. You should change it to distribution map. Okay, so Ielts is just playing with these words. You need to keep track of the last 8 to 10 words that you hear, really.
American coast, we need to create corridors for migration.
Corridors, I think it's a kind of path, like area for migrating. Migrate is like muhajirat, so you go from one place to another place. Yeah, corridor, whatever. Let me check this word. Sometimes you don't even know the words, but you can answer.
Corridor.
Corridor. It means a long passage. So it also means rahro. It's a path. It's a passage. It's a something that you go through. A long piece of land. So it's an area, basically. You don't have to be very exact with the meaning. So migration corridors.
The American coast live out in the high seas. We have some, but not enough. In addition, to preserve species such as leatherback turtles, which live out in the high seas but have their nesting sites on the American coast, we need to create corridors for migration, so they can get from one area to another safely. As well as this, action needs to be taken to lower the levels of fishing quotas to prevent overfishing of endangered species. And finally, there's the problem of bycatch. This refers to the catching of unwanted fish by fishing boats.
Catching of unwanted fish. You know, some fish, you can't really eat them. They're not eatable. So, unwanted fish. So sometimes when you use a big net to collect fish, to catch fish, you catch some fish that you don't really need. You need to detect them and then put them back to water, because we don't want to kill a fish and then not eat it and then not even consume it. All we're doing is we're damaging the environment and the biodiversity of the ocean. That's the meaning.
This refers to the catching of unwanted fish by fishing boats. They're returned to the sea, but they're often dead or dying. If these commercial fishing boats used equipment which was more selective so that only the fish wanted for consumption were caught.
Fish wanted for consumption. Consumption is a noun that works here. Purpose of consumption. Consumption comes from the word consume. Consume is the verb, and it means to use, but here it means to eat. Food consumption means the use of food, eating food. So we needed to have some equipment that are selective. Do not kill all the fish, but kill the ones that we want to eat for consumption.
Or selective so that only the fish wanted for consumption were caught, this problem could be overcome. Okay, so does anyone have any questions about...
That's it. The end of this part. I finally finished Cambridge 11 Test 1, Section 1, 2, 3, 4. My band score was 8.5. Feel free to share your band score in the comments if you want. If you don't want, don't do it. I hope it has helped you. If you have any questions, make sure to put it in the comments. I try to get back to you as soon as possible and answer your questions. Make sure to subscribe to the channel to support me, and then also let your friends know. You can just use a lot of playlists I have. They are really organized. I love them too. Some courses you can find for free on YouTube on playlists. They are phenomenal. I've used them too. So I'm trying to make such courses. Have a good time. I think today I didn't speak Farsi at all. I think it's better, more people can use it, even people who do not speak Farsi. And it's also good for my Persian followers, because most of my followers are Persian, and the more they are exposed to my speaking or any kind of English content, the more prepared they are to take the Ielts exam. Have a good day. I'll see you in the next video. Bye.